Tamara Bauman,
Here.
Jesse Benet, Kelly Brown,
Here.
Jenna Burgoyne,
Here.
Dan Burton,
Here.
Reese Castro,
Here.
Janae Colston,
Here.
Brianna Franco,
Present.
thank you. Marvin Petrell,
Here.
Christy Hamilton, Marisol Tapia Hopper, Benjamin Misch,
Here.
Nawishtunmai Nightgun,
She's having difficulties getting on. She just texted me. She can't call in or get on, but she might be here when she can.
okay,
I was having
thank you.
problems too. I just got on.
Noreen Hill Oneida,
That's me. You don't have to say Oneida.
oh, okay,
Crazy every
good to
time.
know.
Green Hill, yeah.
Okay, Linda Peoples, Christina Sawichi, I think I see you there. Robin Tetsuda, Karen Taylor,
I'm here. Thank you.
thank you. Sherry Tillman,
Here.
thank you so much.
Okay. Could we have the attendees introduce yourselves if you're comfortable doing that, and just so that we have a sense of who else is here, both on the panel and on we have a few guest presentations and other attendees. I'm Peter Lynn, by the way, he, him. Sorry.
Kate Speltz with King County Homeless Housing and Programs. I am here to be presenting a little bit later with regards to the Continuum of Care application.
And I'm Eileen Denham. I work with the City of Seattle, and I will also be presenting with Kate around the COC application.
Okay.
Hello, friends. I am Reverend Dr. Kelly Brown, Senior Pastor at Plymouth Church and Advisory Committee member.
Hi, everyone. My name is Noreen Hill. I'm from the Oneida Tribe, and I'm here as an advisory committee member.
Hi, I'm Tamara Bauman, Rapid Rehousing Advocate. She, her pronouns, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
My name is Louise Castro. I use they, them pronouns. I have lived experience, and I'm currently the Student Stability Fellow with Away Home Washington.
I'm Jenna Burgoyne, Advisory Committee member. She, her pronouns.
I'm Sherry Tillman. I'm a King County Intake Manager and work for Mary's Place.
Ben Miksch, he, him, advisory committee member. And then I just want to make sure that it's recorded for the official record that Christina Sawicki said that she was present in the chat.
Is that everyone?
So,
I saw the comment that Linda didn't have the link, so I sent that to her.
so if that was everyone, are we ready to head into public comment?
Yeah, it looks like it. We've got, I will open up the chat for public comment, and it looks like there's 2 hands raised, and they have a total of 10 minutes to ask questions. And so I will open that up right now. One moment. Looks like Cindy is the first to raise her hand.
I just wanted to get your attention because I was mute and I couldn't introduce myself. But I'm just going to observe today. I'm kind of concerned that we're expecting the seniors, which is 17% of our homeless population, to participate in something called moving to work. And the city in 2003 got to undo a lot of rules, which I usually don't like government, but HUD has some fair rules around housing. But in 2003, we got to change all the rules. And I can't find a list of the rules, but I know it really restricts people. Like, nobody gets to pick where they want to live anymore. They find an apartment and they grab it, but they don't know that then they have to live there the rest of their life. I've been looking at the Corporation for Supportive Housing. No housing providers are expected to provide it, and the one I know is a -0 on the case management. Nobody cares. We've got the numbers housed. All I see on the corporate supportive housing is ask the tenant how they felt. How did they like this process? Nobody ever goes and asks the senior citizen. You got offered an apartment in a part of the King County you didn't know. You took it because you were desperate. You didn't know you were going to have to live the rest of your life there. You didn't know if they didn't have the services for you. Oh, well, go without. And it's all because we're in this Move to Work program that we applied for in 2003. That's 18 years ago or something. What is the Move to Work program, and how come it can have all these real strict restrictions? And I guess it's meant for the people that are able to go to work. The seniors who are
okay, picture without me in it. Excuse me. It's all good.
Okay.
Y'all trying to leave me out? For real?
Anyway, I'm just going to watch how you prioritize people. And just remember that since 2003, it's been a crisis, and people did get housed, but it's not where they want to spend the rest of their life. And the aging just want a place instead of the streets. And instead, I'm not even sure what the Continuum of Care does, but I think it would say to make sure they have quality care. Can you tell me one agency that is trying to even get a rating of 2 out of 5 with the community of supportive housing? The one I know gets a less than a 1, maybe a 1, then a lot of zeros. So why do we have the Corporation for Supportive Housing as one of our partners for homelessness? Where are they? I think their stuff is really good. Our contracts don't require them to do one little bit. They can do a 0. They can do a 0. They could be the most crappiest place in the world as long as the toilet flushes and the heat's on. They're housed and we're happy. We're not looking at the quality of permanent supportive housing we're offering. And I'm saying these people can get a tenant-based voucher and get the heck out of this restrictive permanent supportive housing system that has no quality. If they have friends or somebody who can get them a tenant-based voucher and get them out of those places, let them go. There's enough homeless people that might want to land there, get their feet, figure out what they're doing, and then move on too. But the permanent trap somebody in permanent supportive housing is awful, especially when they'll never be able to go to work.
Thank you, Cindy. We're going to go next to John Hemphill.
Hello, can you hear me? Awesome. Okay, so first thing first, I'm on the phone with Linda, and she's saying she's still having problems with the link, and so you can just double check and make sure that she can get on. The next thing is that, like, just for, a couple weeks ago, I know I asked Peter to be included on the email list to be able to track these meetings. I'm still not on those, and so I don't think I've been tracking the special meetings or anything like that. So I need to be on by end of business day today. I need to be on all meeting invitations, right, to provide staff support, and then also any distros, because I'm not sure if these folks are getting, packets such as like the governing committee does to review things weeks beforehand and actually get the debrief and like go over that. And if not, that's part of my job, is just to connect with you and other folks, staffing folks, to make sure that they get that information and they're properly educated on what they need or what they're going to be voting on. The next thing is, and the final thing is that I don't know currently how the bylaws and stuff like that is being implemented, and so maybe that's a greater discussion. But I want to just make sure that the folks on the board, on the CLC board, know their powers and their authority, and they know those bylaws like the back of their hand, right? And that they're also included on any of the major decision making that's going on, if not representative for them, in any sort of meetings that's go on that includes like policy and decision making. And so I know it's strapped for time. I'm not going to take up all your time, but I just need those three things, especially being included in all distros, so I can provide these folks support, especially lived experience folks. Thank you.
Thank you.
I applaud that. Thank you, John. That's great.
So we have 5 more minutes for public comment. I will leave the chat open for that to happen.
I just want to reiterate what Tamara just said. I really want to thank Jonathan Hemphill for that statement, and the fact that we need to have a sense of our power, and we need to be up on anything that is going down that we don't know about. It's very important that we be up to speed and have our staff with us in our meetings. Thank you.
All right, are we ready for the next step?
Looks like we are. We still have a few minutes, I think, for public comment.
We have some comments in the chat.
Can someone read those?
Yeah, Amy states that they don't need to speak, but just want to acknowledge the lovely community spaghetti dinner sponsored by Nicholsville last night in the Central District where I live. That's great.
Can I ask committee members, are folks getting the meeting notices for the other meetings, or okay, we're gonna make sure that all of you all are enrolled in those meetings. It'll be a lot of mailings, but like, you get to pick and choose. Okay.
I'm not getting the emailings. I just know that they're located on the website because that's what we've been told before.
They are located there. I'll just I want to make sure that whatever stuff we do that's pushed, we'll want to make sure that you guys are enrolled for that. Okay. But that is where the meetings are listed.
I had heard something earlier today about a distro for sub-regional planning, and if we could, I think, get that would be helpful.
That is a agenda topic. We hopefully will get an update on that from Alexis. I believe we're almost there. Is it possible to leave the chat and lines open and move forward with the agenda?
Yes, that's typically what happens. There's 2 more minutes, and I want to acknowledge that Jesse Benet has joined a few minutes ago, and everyone's here except for Christy, Marisol, and Robin, it looks like.
Sorry for being late, everybody.
No worries. Well, if there are no objections, I'll try to take us into the next agenda item, which is hopefully will be a good discussion on the advisory committee's roles and responsibilities. Shanae and I had the opportunity to meet with Mark and Peter and others on Monday to get a clearer picture of what we will be asked to do as we are onboarding. And now that our committee is up and structured, you know, what work will we be doing? That fair recap? All righty. I don't know how many folks received the King County Regional Homeless Authority Advisory Committee onboarding. There was a packet that was sent out to committee members, I want to say back in March, that started the discussion on community of care roles. Can anybody speak to that? Is that a document folks are familiar with in any way?
Can you remind us of the name of the document?
King County Regional Homeless Authority Advisory Committee Onboarding COC, the Continuum of Care Roles. An overview, a purpose, roles, and responsibility.
I'd have to go back and check. I can't quite remember. But was that the one that had like the charter and?
It was part of the packet where we got the charter.
Okay.
And
yeah, then I think I did get that one.
So I'd like to start off the discussion with possibly having Peter do the role of the advisory committee. It is from my understanding, a piece that's required by HUD for the ongoing continuum of care. And then maybe we can dive into things we've learned about work groups, purposes, what our relationships will be with the other boards, how some work has been divided up amongst the different committees within the authority so that we can figure out where best to plug in and where our voices will bring the folks who are not at the table to the table for some of these programs discussions. Peter?
Okay, great. So the structure in the continuum of care. So the continuum of care guidelines and rules that are put forward by HUD require that that all entities set up a committee, a board for the continuum, and that the board has a few very specific responsibilities. So every continuum of care is responsible for operating an HMIS system, and the board has a responsibility to ensure that there is a lead, there's an HMIS lead. So homeless management information system is everyone who receives funding from the federal government has to operate one of those systems. That there are lots of vendors who provide that, and one of the responsibilities of the board is to ensure that there is such an entity, and that entity is operating the HMIS effectively. In addition, there is a responsibility to ensure that the continuum is operating a coordinated entry system, and that there is a body to do policy for coordinated entry for that, and locally that is the there is a coordinated entry policy committee. There is so there's a responsibility for HMIS, there's a responsibility for coordinated entry. There's also a responsibility, and that would be a part of what we're going to hear from Kate and Eileen later in the presentation, to ensure oversight on the HUD application. So every year we apply for money to HUD for grants. We have a set of grants that we've already received. So we're looking at renewals for those grants and in making sure that they can still line up with HUD priorities. HUD's priorities evolve over time. They usually signal over a long period of time when they're starting to change things, as they, for example, shifted away from transitional housing toward a focus on permanent supportive housing, or they shifted to a focus on housing first and low barrier and things like that. So they give a lead time, but if you don't over time then adjust, your renewals start to become at risk, because they're not, we're not just given the money, we have to compete for it. So on a certain level, part of the responsibility is to ensure that we are keeping a clear line of sight at what the HUD priorities are, and that we're keeping ourselves competitive. So we have our renewal grants that we go for, and then as you'll hear, sometimes HUD puts new money on the table, and we want to make sure that we're very competitive going for any new money that might be available. So part of the responsibilities, and you obviously have an opportunity to talk through this piece with Kate and Eileen. That is a role for the advisory committee, is to make sure that we have focused those resources appropriately, and that we are prioritizing those effectively. As you'll hear, we haven't heard yet from HUD about the NOFA this year. So the notice of funding availability, sorry if I use jargon, but notice of funding availability is the NOFA. That means they're putting the money forward and telling us to apply for it. They haven't opened it this year. It's late. I mean, feels very late from my perspective, but it's really on HUD's timeline, and so we won't know what is available. We will know that we have to put forward a really solid application. So part of the role responsibility for this board and this body is to look at and make sure that we are aligning with priorities. So part of that is to ensure that there is good alignment with the community, with the community priorities and what those are. And so, I think Kate and Eileen are going to run through, those have been approved in the past. We want to make sure that we go back and revisit those and keep them aligned with, with who we are and who you all say, see us as, right? As representing the community. So this, just to be clear, these are the sort of formal responsibilities for the body with regard to the HUD NOFA. I would just like to be clear that, from Mark's perspective, from my perspective, I think from your perspective, from what I've heard, there's a much bigger interest in a broader set of goals and input on what's going on. And I think that one of the things that Mark articulated, and Marvin, Shanae, you tell me what you heard. I'm sort of articulating what I heard, but that this body is an incredible wealth of experience, both lived experience, service experience, and the combination, intersection of that, and brings a perspective to the capacity of this continuum to stand up new work and to think through how to do good work that is really unparalleled. So I think one of the areas where Mark really sees the need for and goal for this is like giving feedback on, fundamental questions. What would success look like? What is good service? What are the things that we need to be measuring that would indicate that? And how is it that we're gonna line up the values of the continuum and the values that have been articulated in the documents that stood up this body with with the needs of people experiencing homelessness? So, really sort of bigger, broader questions than the ones that are kind of now, obviously the HUD stuff has to get done because we got to get, we got to do the applications. We got to get, we got to manage the things that HUD requires of us. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I forgot to mention one body of responsibility, which is that as we have a body that looks at HMI, that runs HMIS, we are responsible for looking at our system performance and making sure that our system, is performing. And HUD has given everybody a set of performance metrics. And there is a body that is looking at that. There is another board that looks at that. I cannot remember its name. The system, I think it's the system. Somebody help me with this.
What, the
Performance Committee?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's the System Performance Committee. Sorry. But so, that is there is a committee that's looking specifically at this. Now, obviously some of these bodies were created before before the regional authority came into being, and some of them have, come into being with it and, are operating in parallel. Some are, surviving from before and things like that. So, obviously one of the things we need to look at is like, what are all the bodies and, are they all still in alignment with their roles and responsibilities? That's part of what we got to do, particularly for this body, and make sure everybody knows what, those core HUD functions are, but then think through like how best to get the expertise from this body to, the substantial amount of work we have ahead of us. Noreen, I see your hand.
Oh, I didn't even know I raised my hand. I'm forwarding the COC slides that came out, but I need Tamara's email. I have everyone else's email but Tamara, so I'll send it up. I can forward it real quick if I could get that. You want to inbox it to me?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat. Anybody.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's the packet that you were referring to, Marvin?
Yes, and it primarily consists of the standing work groups that were created for the Continuum of Care Board to have system level focus on activities surrounding the different work areas, the Youth Action Board. And as we said, as you mentioned, there are, with the establishment of the authorities, some may have changed in name, but are designed to fulfill the function of the previous work group. But a good understanding of those work groups will allow, I think, the advisory committee to find areas in which they believe need to have that expertise or that language, or being at the, getting at the table and seeing how groups are measured. So what I had was the Consumer Advisory Council, the Youth Action Board, System Performance Work Group, the Coordinated Agency Policy Advisory Group, the Continuum of Care Applications and Ranking, and then cross-cutting policies. So I believe when we were speaking on Monday, I heard one or two other, or their names may have changed, but they were now the ones looking at policy. Most seems to be surrounding policy and reviews. So
And then just to mention them, because they do play in, the regional authority has been designated as the lead applicant. The continuum care lead. We will take on the role responsibility for HMIS. We're not currently operating that, but because that, we are also a body that also has a board structure. The regional authority has the implementation board, which is doing sort of more managerial level things for the regional authority, and it also has a governing committee, which is includes elected officials and is so those two bodies themselves are the governance structure for the regional authority. So Mark's, that's effectively sort of Mark's boss are those two bodies. And that plays into the mix of the structures within the region. Okay. So I think some of the bodies that some of those groups and councils are sponsored by the Continuum, and some are not. So Lived Experience Coalition obviously exists on its own, and yet also has a wealth of experience and knowledge base within it. So alignment with and speaking to and among the various groups is also really important, and figuring out how these bodies play with each other and align is another thing that we're all going to have to sort of work on as we go forward. Shanae, I don't know if you wanted to.
No, I'm good.
How do others feel about this discussion so far? Are there any questions?
I have something to say. This is Karen Taylor. It just seems I don't know, somewhat confusing. Like, oh, we have this body, we had to go to that body to do this, to do that. We want to know how they did it before, blah, 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 blah. I just want to know, what are we facing? Are we facing any decisions that we need to make? I heard Peter talk over something about funding and the funds that have been allocated, and some already have, and when are we going to start making those decisions? What does that look like? I understand some people probably want to do a big research on what it is we're doing. Me personally, I'm going to get to the work and get to the understanding and talk about that.
Well, that's an interesting statement. For many of these boards or work groups that are focusing on system level activities, have a cap on how many sit are actually on the group. And if we want to be at the table, we need to have a clear understanding of which groups are working on what and where we want to have our voices inputted. Was my understanding after talking with Mark is that this is the kind of relationships where members from the different advisory committee, implementation, and others get together and actually are doing that work. So more specificity for how we can engage might help us navigate what seems to be somewhat unruly and kind of tossed together.
Well, I'm already familiar with the governance board. As a matter of fact, I am a member of the governance board if they need me. And I'm familiar with the implementation board as well. But my question is, we keep talking around, in my opinion, in circles about what's happened before, what's the process, but I'm asking about the meat.
So shortly, we're going to get an update on the NOFA. To this point, 7 months of work has been put into the NOFA evaluation, ratings, rankings, and the physical application has been done by staffers. And it's been reported to the implementation board. However, we haven't received those same reports, which leaves us in the catch-up position. We won't really know how to have input until we learn more about how the process works. The big one, if we're looking for something that we kind of should begin talking about as a group, is the point in time count. It's not terribly effective tool, but it has, and it's many different ways of being done, been great community building tools and has extracted some data that's sometimes missed. That might be a conversation worth having for us if we need something solid to point to. I think that the work groups are carrying on the work of the authority. And if we want to be advisors, or if we want to advise, we need to know their work, how we can make input and show up. I don't know if that
I
answers.
just want to ask, are these, we're talking about the same ones
No,
that
it
are going to
didn't.
be some that will be disappearing, some that will be joined together, correct? Those are the ones you're referring to, Marvin?
Peter mentioned that some had been joined and others have been changed. The name of the group has changed, but the focus of the work has not. But having a clear picture of,
I just wanted that people to understand that those are the work groups that we're talking about, in specific, that you could, or you will actually, I mean, Mark already said that, right? Like there is going to be changes, as Marvin said, to the names of them. There will be changes to, like in regards to joining them together, because cases doing the same body of work, or in some cases need to be doing the same body of work. And so they'll all join together. And as Marvin's saying, like we need to know when, where, and how, and what influences that we have on them.
Come in.
So there's several folks who have raised their hands. I wonder if we could, let's go.
Let's call them out.
Yeah, Sherry, I saw your hand go up first, or you're the first in queue here.
Okay. Couple of questions. Who is our boss? And then, so what I'm getting out of it is that basically we don't make final decisions sound like on different things. We're like advisory of support to different groups. And correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm trying to just understand. And yeah, and who do the vouchers go to for the MOU? But those are my 3 questions.
So so in terms of like boss, you guys don't have a boss. Like on some level, like you're responsible to the participants and the membership of the Continuum, and like on some level, like you all are representing and answerable to the Continuum as a body. In terms of the specific scope of decision making for this committee, some of those things are going to be discussed in the presentation on the NOFA. There are some very specific things like the priorities and other elements of that. Some of the stuff, Marvin mentioned that this is a process that's been going on. Part of that had to take place because the timing aligned with having to get things moving before we got to a structure. And if you miss the deadlines for submitting those monies, you could literally lose those monies, and that that would be a catastrophe. We can't do that. So on the other hand, we do have the opportunity to look at the criteria and go into those. Do those still meet our community needs, or do we want to revisit them? Do we want to come up with a different set of criteria? Those are things that that's what this organization really needs to look at, listen to, and grapple with, and then reflect back what your sense of the continuum is. With regard to what's the last thing you asked about? The vouchers under the MOU? They will go to the folks that were lined out in the MOU, which is and I think everybody got a copy of the MOUs. It's a group of people. It's a group of people who are under the COVID prioritization. So that's BIPOC folks, older folks, it's folks with pre-existing health conditions. It's a number of folks who are in that COVID prioritization matrix, trying to get to unsheltered folks, trying to make sure that we are addressing, a plural group of the needs of the community. This is, the resource doesn't cover everybody, obviously, we wish it did. There's a group of people who are going to be coming out of permanent supportive housing in a move-on capability. I think that was one of the ones that was called out by the Lived Experience Coalition, supported here. There are going to be a group of referrals coming in from those providers who face into survivors of domestic violence and human trafficking. And the coordinated entry team is sort of working on how exactly the process is going to. We're working with the public housing agencies and the provider community to figure out how those would be navigated. Okay, but it's that core group that you all recommend. All right. Sorry, Tamara.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Did you have a follow-up question, Sherry?
I did. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
And then, so when we can't decide, just say that we can't decide with the group to make it the final decision. Who makes which group will make that final decision? Because I keep hearing like, oh, we're going to work it out. We're going to work it out. We're going to work it out. But at some point, that's not going to work. Who makes that final decision?
Listen, I have confidence that you all can come to decisions in the time frame and at the need. My sense is, that let's have confidence. I have confidence in you. Like that's part of what this body is responsible for, is coming to, there are some decisions that have to be made by this body. And, those will be put forward as a vote. This is informational. So this is like a discussion, right? And maybe because it's a discussion, it doesn't seem directed or like it's getting to a conclusion or something like that. But, there are things, as will be pointed out in the presentation with regard to the NOFA, there are things that have to be decided, and we'll want to make sure that, we get to closure there. Because it is actually, there are votes that will have to be taken on things that, will the application that needs to be put forward. And if the body couldn't decide, we'd probably have to call a special meeting and, do it again, the way we did on the co-chair. It's like make a couple passes at it if we couldn't get to closure on a given day. Okay.
Thank you.
Who's next?
I think it was me, right? So I wanted to volunteer, I guess, if there's a way to have one of our members join the CEA policy advisory or PAC, whatever that is. I just have, since I've been a provider, over the last 6 years, I've had concerns about how folks can access the resources that they need. And I think that's a pretty common concern in our community, is the policies are surrounding CEA referrals and external fills not being eligible for mobility requests. I want to push back on some of that quite strongly. And I'm hoping to get some support with this committee this board to kind of loosen up some of those restrictions, because I have personally observed some bias there, and I don't want that to continue. So I guess all this to say is that because of the community concerns, because of my personal observations and concerns, and my deep care and love for the people that I serve, I want to be somebody who has inside eyes on the CEA, not to be like a big brotherish kind of entity, but somebody who can help guide CEA from the board's perspective. Does that make sense?
Yes. Just real quickly, as we're moving forward, is Maria taking the minutes today? If we can, when folks identify areas in which that interest them, I'd like to make that part of the record so that we can start sorting out and getting information to folks that would help them.
That would be, I am doing that. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry to jump in. I'm sure there were other hands. I can't see the hand raised.
Looks like Ben pulled his hand down. So Karen?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Shanae and I both sit on the CEA board, and we would love tomorrow, I hope I'm saying your name right, for anyone to come. And also, doggone it, I was going to say also, oh, this is what I was going to say. A lot of times I have found personally from being involved in this work that there's a lot of talk, a lot of getting ready, and then there's this big fast surge of oh, we got to do this and we got to do this, we got to meet this deadline, we're going to do it now, and we never get enough time to really sit there and chew it and talk about it. But it's always this rush at the end, and it's very uncomfortable for me to not know looking forward what the plans and goals are. I realize that Mark, Peter, and some others have just took on this King County Regional Homeless Authority role and all that, but we got to start moving. I would like to know what we're doing. I know I say this all the time. I need to know what's the meat, what's the flavor, what do you need from us? How can we be a part of decision making, meaningful decision making as community members? It's just very important to me, and I personally probably get irritated with all the fluff of it, the fluff and talk, and I'm direct and to the point, and that's just my personality. It's not meant to be offensive to anybody. That's just who I am. I'm about business. I'm about action. So that's why I say the things I say.
So really quickly, are there any other advisory committee members actively, presently working on any other work group within the authority? Youth Action Board, System Performance, is anyone sitting on another board?
Jonathan Hemphill is on the governance board. Harold, a lot of the LEC members, Christina's here, Shanae and I, there's a bunch of us on the line. I mean, you guys speak up, please. Let me shut up.
So for clarification, the question was to the 19 advisory committee members. If we are working already in certain areas, that would be good information to know. It would help structure our agendas so that we're getting updated and reported, not by what someone else tells us, but what our committee members are experiencing within that work. Such as Karen has explained, that she feels that there's just a lot of talking and not much being decided upon, or a slow reveal of goals or benchmarks for the group, as we move forward. So I am really interested in what others, if they are working on something, let's figure that piece out. And my question still remains, for if folks don't know all of the work groups, happy to provide more information about their focus and what they do. And if that interests folks, please let us know so that we can start getting those voices back out, at the time that the work is being generated, not after it's done. And the rush, we need a decision comes into play.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, I never say where I'm coming from. Like, I'm from the United Tribe, but I work with Mother Nation. I'm the executive director and founder of Mother Nation. And, I used to be out there in the streets. I'm a survivor of gender-based violence. And I escaped an MMIW. And I know that we have issues as an Indigenous community with the coordinated entry. We've always had issues there. It's very difficult to have our folks going through that system. And now they're looking at moving gender-based violence underneath there, which is going to be even more difficult, I feel. But we do have a representative who doesn't sit on those main committees, but sits on the Indigenous folks. They get together to unite. I think it's called Native American, Alaskan Native. What is it called? It's not outreach. It's basically they all come together as an Indigenous communities and talk about the coordinated entry and the issues that happen there.
Yeah. He's conferencing it.
Yeah, case conferencing is one of them. Yeah. So Ruben Twin is our representative there. He's our program manager at interim level. But I work closely with Nwistamai, and I know she's been trying to get on. And Nwistamai just got hired back on at Chief Seattle Club, so she's now their program director for the for the homeless program. And she speaks for all of us, not just her organization. She speaks for all Indigenous people, and so do I. So we're very happy to be here.
So once again, I can't see hands as well as others.
Tamara's hand is up.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. Sorry about that. I am a former DV advocate at a confidential shelter, and I'm also a DV survivor. And the idea of moving gender-based violence, the coordinated pathway for DV survivors under CEA's mainstream, that really concerns me. I would not do that.
Yeah, that's not what's happening.
Okay.
It's just a point of referral. It's not that they're, it's a connection point. It's not a, that will not be the same. Okay. So their coordinated entry is going to remain. Yeah, I hear you. I also want to just, reflect back candidly to everybody. I was really surprised by the way that the community feels about coordinated entry, and that it's not sort of viewed as a community property and a community collective responsibility and a collaborative venture. And so like that is not the way we built it in LA. I mean, it was worlds different. And like on some level, I get where people get frustrated with a system because homelessness still persists and is not addressing it. But there's a difference between the resource scarcity situation that we're in, and we don't, it's not enough housing for everybody or housing resource or whatever, and not having any confidence that the process works and having parallel processes and other kinds of things. So I want to just, convey to you that my intention is to completely rebuild our coordinated entries such that there is not, it just can't be, this can't persist. This is not a viable path. So I commit that to you guys. I will work closely with you on that, but we all got to take collective responsibility for it because it's a shared responsibility. We can't go back to wait lists or whatever, there was before, but we can't have side process, it's anyway. Sorry. And,
do we have other hands? Anyone else? Then if no one objects, I think we should get a NOFA update from Kate and Eileen since they've made their time available to do that for us today.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'm Kate Speltz with King County Homeless Housing and Programs, and I'm here with my colleague Eileen Denham from the City of Seattle, and we are the people who are staffing the COC application on behalf of the Continuum of Care this year and have been doing so for a number of years in the past. We're staffing it again this year in preparation for turning it over to KCRHA fully next year. And we were here and presented a high-level overview at the orientation meetings that some of you participated in back in, I think it was May. And we talked about some of this then. We wanted to come back to you today because there is a particular element of the COC application that we are going to want to bring before this body. It is called the priority rank order, which are the projects that are actually submitted to HUD for our Continuum of Care funds. And so what we wanted to do today is go over that little bit of that process again in a little more detail than we did, so that you can know what to expect when that comes, because it is highly likely to be one of those processes that is going to be a ridiculous timeline when it actually comes down to it. HUD controls the timeline. We would have expected the NOFA to be out by now. Usually comes out in late July. Typically, it is due by the end of September. We're hoping the due date's going to be later than that this year, because if it's going to be due at the end of September, we only have 2 months and we haven't seen the application yet. So we really don't know what the timeline is going to be, but we do know it won't be a very long timeline when it comes before us. So we wanted to go through with you today the process that we are taking to come up with the recommended priority order that will come before you for review and your recommendations for the application. And I am going to attempt to share my screen, and we'll see if I am successful. Are people seeing something that says COC values and priority at the top?
Not yet.
Not yet. So maybe this was something that was sent out yesterday, so you might be able to pull it up yourselves. Meanwhile, I'm going to try once again to share.
Yes.
I have come through. Okay, great. So again, what I'm going to do, and Eileen is going to be speaking to a piece of this, is walk you through the various steps that we are taking based on locally identified priorities and values specific to the HUD Continuum of Care application that have been developed. And then we'll show you an example of what we'll be bringing before you to try and explain what we're going to need your feedback on. So what we come up with first is a preliminary rank order of all the projects that are going to be put in, that are eligible for renewal applications. And so in order to do that, we use our locally developed values. The values were developed for the 2019 process. In 2020, we did not have a competitive process. HUD simply renewed projects for 2020 because of COVID. In 2019, we had a robust process of reviewing and updating some of our local values and our decision-making factors. At that time, they were reviewed with consultation with the Youth Action Board, with the Lived Experience Coalition, and brought before your predecessor board for approval. And we use these values to sort of frame the application that we have local projects that are asking to renew go through, so we can come up with a score-based rank order. So the values and priorities, part of it takes into account what we know HUD wants for these funds, because again, these are priorities specifically for the Continuum of Care program investments. We know HUD looks for quality data. They look for demonstrated performance through the HMIS. They look for a community that is using coordinated entry for all and projects that are connected with that. They want to make sure that resources are being managed well, that projects themselves are using them, and that we as a community are considering how those projects are used. HUD is very focused on reducing barriers to program entry and using a housing first approach. So we keep all of those elements in mind when we look at our initial score-based rank order. When we're looking at our rank order, we also keep in mind, and these are things that you would see when we would be presenting to you a proposed rank order, geographic and population diversity of projects, so that we aren't funding just one kind of project for one population. So that would be, youth, families, single adults, chronically homeless, people experiencing domestic violence. The potential impact of loss of housing units is one of the things that is considered, and what that impact would be on the homeless system. And then what is our opportunity to respond to both our local priorities and HUD's goals for these specific dollars, which are no or low barrier housing, serving people who are literally homeless, helping people move as quickly to permanent housing or long-term housing stability in permanent housing, and racial equity are all factors that are considered. So these are the program values and prioritization factors that were developed and approved and used to develop our local application process. And the first ones are sort of system level. So one of the things we keep in mind as we look at our project rank order is we want to maintain as much of the HUD continuum of care funds for our community as possible. So we want to make decisions that aren't going to put our funding at risk. We want to be promoting our goals of reducing racial disparities, centering leadership of people with lived experience. We have that both in terms of our decision-making bodies, but also when we look at some of our questions for agencies, it has to do with how they are using input from participants in their programs to help inform and change their own policies. So we want to see that at a project-based basis as well. So that first set are sort of some of our system-wide. And then when we look at specific projects, we want projects and agencies that are actively participating in the continuum of care, that are helping advance our collective goals, that are focused on moving people to permanent housing or helping them sustain permanent housing, that do not replace mainstream resources. This is one of HUD's goals. They want to see projects leveraging and using any mainstream resources, but not using continuum of care dollars to pay for those things, connecting people with resources in their community, focusing on those who are literally homeless, their participation in HMIS, good data quality. HUD and we have a housing first focus, and that is one of the things they look for with their funds. Then there are the HUD continuum of care goals. Again, that's movement to permanent housing, really being one of the primary goals. And then HUD also wants to make sure that funds are being spent, that the match is being required, that projects are being occupied, and that reports are received on a regular basis. HUD looks at all of those elements, and so we do too. And then again, elevating the voices of people with lived experience as they look at their own programs and at the system level. So those are the values that we consider as we look at our local application. I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to be switching to another document. If anyone has any questions of me thus far, I will stop and breathe.
Do we have folks with questions? I can't see once again if someone has their hand raised. So I'll try to get better at learning how all this works.
Ready for me to talk about document 2? So in your packet, we also provided an example of what we call a tiering strategy. One of the things that we are waiting for with the NOFA is to know, number one, whether HUD is going to require tiering, and then how much we're going to have to put into tier 1 and tier 2. And I think in our previous meeting with you, we talked to you about tiering, which are financial thresholds. Used to be back in the day, HUD would let us submit an application and we'd submit projects in a rank order from 1 to 50. HUD is now making us, this continuum of care, make some decisions about how we place projects. Projects in tier 1 generally are going to be funded and will be based on local rating criteria. HUD has designated tier 2 as a little less, what's the word I want? They're going to, they're going to be subject to HUD's review. We rank order all of the projects from first to last, and then we begin to make those really tough decisions about what we're going to be putting into tier 2. And what I have in front of you is just a sample chart. These numbers are not real. We just really want to acquaint you with what we're going to be bringing to you. And as Kate said, when this NOFA finally comes out, we think it's going to be fast, fast, fast. Because HUD is already a month behind. And we know that they're going to want to wrap this up quickly. So when we know what our tier 2 amount is, and in the past, it has generally been about 6% of our annual renewal demand. And our annual renewal demand is the amount that takes to renew all of our projects for 1 year. I use the figure 48 million. That's very close to what our annual renewal demand is. At 6%, we will have to put $2.8 million worth of projects in tier 2. One of the things that we also wait for the NOFA is whether or not HUD is going to add some additional funding to the bonus funding, which would be in addition to our annual renewal demand. Again, I use the figure 1%. HUD generally will tell us what that amount is going to be, what the maximum bonus amount can be. We just picked $1 million. So in this scenario, we're going to have to put $3.8 million in tier 2. So we will have our score-based rank order, but we also have to keep in mind that HUD has its own scoring schema for projects in tier 2. It's based on what our application score is. They assign 50 points right off the top based on what our score is. As you can see, as Kate's been talking about, they emphasize housing first. They emphasize low barrier, no participation requirements. They are depending on us to say whether or not the projects that we're putting in tier 2 actually meet those requirements. And there's an automatic 10 points for those. Then we go down to something called project ranking. It's worth 40 points. I'm not going to talk about that right now. When we get to our handout number 3 and the actual sort of what rank order might look like, we're going to talk to you about strategies around making sure we maximize those 40 points. Because one thing that Kate talked about when she talked about what our priorities are for this program, it's to maintain funding in our continuum of care. We don't want to lose any funding. So we pay very, very close attention to this HUD scoring schema in tier 2. So we will be talking about that a little bit more. There's only 3 types of projects that can be put in tier 2. Those are called, one is called realignment projects. Realignment projects are typically a renewal project, transitional housing program, for example, that has been listening to the continuum, wants to position itself to be more effective, meet the goals of the continuum, and wants to realign to a different program component. The example that we give you there is it's a project that's a currently funded transitional housing program that would like to move into a joint transitional housing, rapid rehousing component. We work with projects all year long. We're in constant contact with them. We know and encourage transitional housing projects as an example to be really looking to see whether or not their programs are continuing to meet the needs of our continuum. The other projects that will go in tier 2 are renewal projects. Again, we're required to designate an amount that goes in tier 2, and some of those projects will be existing renewal projects. So that's just what it is. The next type of project that will be in tier 2 are new projects. Again, I talked about bonus funding. If we get bonus funding, I can tell you that we will pursue those additional funds if we can. Again, we're going to wait and see if those are available to us. And another thing that we can take a look at are reallocation dollars. So these are new projects that are made possible by taking funds away from existing programs to fund a new project. And we'll talk about that in a little bit.
And I would just add that there are only certain types of projects that can be new projects. Do you want to speak to that, Eileen?
Yeah, I do. So one of the things that we wait for, it's why this we're on pins and needles waiting for the NOFA to come out. HUD tells us what kind of projects we can fund as new projects. We don't get to decide necessarily that for ourselves. In previous NOFAs, we've allowed to fund new projects that are permanent supportive housing for chronically homeless. I think you've all heard of those. Rapid rehousing projects, or the new joint component, which is transitional housing connected to rapid rehousing. Also let us add new projects for HMIS and new projects for coordinated entry. So there's only 4 types of projects that we can add as new projects. So now we do a lot of advanced work trying to figure out and help us strategize how we rank projects in tier 2. So what you have in front of you are the priority listing decision factors that we use. They're assumptions that help us guide our decisions, the preliminary rank order. We'll only include those projects that can receive full points, that are match what HUD's priorities are. Again, we want to maximize the amount of funding that we get. We're not going to put a project in tier 2 that we know HUD is not going to fund because it's not one of those projects that we know that they will fund. We also, and Kate will be talking about this a little bit more as we get into the actual rank order. We order applications from smallest to largest funding requests within the 4 project categories, except where local values and HUD priorities may dictate otherwise. So we sort of talked about geographic, making sure that we have projects equitably spread across the continuum, that we're not heavily funding one population over another, one type of program component over another. So we have to make some judgments within that. We also value realignment projects as a priority in tier 2. So if we are working with a project, they've chosen to realign, they've chosen to become another kind of project, say moving from transitional housing into permanent supportive housing, which has happened in the past. We value that move and we want to make sure that we protect that project within tier 2, and we'll be placing that project such that we are not going to jeopardize their funding. We use the COC preliminary score-based rank order, again with a special emphasis on low barrier and movement to permanent housing, to help us identify current projects that perhaps will not be renewed based on prior performance, our knowledge of the program. We will identify projects moving from the bottom of the score-based rank order, and we will move up, selecting lower performing projects that could be subject to reallocation. That has happened in the past. You need to be aware of that, and that will be something that we will be bringing to you if that happens. Again, we use the COC preliminary score-based rank order to identify renewal projects for placement in tier 2, again, from the bottom of the ranking, moving up. Again, we'll be doing that to maximize the project type and priority of HUDs. Again, we want to make sure that how we order our projects in tier 2 reflects the goals and priorities of our continuum, but at the same time, make sure that we don't lose any funding. We don't have any projects drop off of tier 2 because we didn't recognize exactly the type of project that HUD would value in tier 2. We value renewal projects that are strategically placed in tier 2. Sometimes we may have to put, and you will see this in the document that we'll be talking about next, you will see that there might be projects that have a higher score than some of the projects in tier 1, but we place them in tier 2. And we had, again, to do that very strategically in order to maximize our ability and ensure that we're going to get all of our projects in tier 2 funded. We'll talk to you about what that strategy looks like. The other thing that we do is we value the maintenance of the number of chronically homeless dedicated units in our continuum. So you will see when you look at the rank order, even the pretend rank order, which we're going to be talking to you about, that our continuum and HUD places a high priority on units dedicated to the chronically homeless. Now, I think we've talked to you that this is a national competition. We are guided by very strict, I don't know what you call it, but it's a very prescriptive notice of funding availability. Within that, NOFA HUD has its own internal application deadline. So not only do they tell us when the NOFA is due, and I will, as an aside, tell you that if the NOFA is due on October 30th, our internal goal is that we will be ready to submit on October 28th. So we will do everything to make sure that we are going to meet that HUD due date. But at the same time, HUD has its own internal application deadlines. And one of those is a deadline for ensuring that all local applications have been submitted to the COC for review. We are ahead of that. All of our COC applications, at least our local applications, have been submitted. As soon as the NOFA comes out and we know what it looks like, we will then be preparing and submitting the HUD project applications, which gets uploaded into the electronic application. We have 30 days to get all of that done. So from when HUD releases the NOFA, we want to make sure that we have all of our applications in. Again, they want to make sure that we're not leaving all of this to like the day before the application is due. They're also very committed to transparency, making sure that in fact we are keeping the continuum informed. 15 days prior to the due date of the NOFA, final decisions on projects to be renewed, reduced, eliminated, or added to the application need to be final, and applicants need to be notified in writing. So historically, what we have done, even before HUD was mandating this, once we have our preliminary approved rank order, we've made those really tough decisions, we hold a community meeting. So all recipients and subrecipients will be invited to a public meeting. We will present the rank order to them. We will present our rationale about why projects are placed the way they are. And on that very same day, we will issue written letters to them with our decision. Either they're included in the application, not included in the application, included but reduced. They'll be notified in person and in writing. HUD also says that 2 days prior to the NOFA being submitted, we have to post the COC application to our website. So again, we are definitely going to be ahead. We want to have our application done. And we will be posting the priority listing to the COC website 2 days before the application is due. And you will be riding right along with us. Yeah. So are there any questions about our tier 2 strategy? Now, what you're looking at right now is a sample rank order. These are made up, make-believe numbers, but it's going to help you sort of more visualize what I just spoke about. Kate?
Okay, So again, this is a sample of what we would be bringing to you, having done all the work we've just discussed and putting before you the list of all the projects that we would be proposing to include in our application to HUD. Again, you will see there is tier 1. This is historically recently been about 94% of the dollars per amount. It is all nationally competitive. We tend to compete very well nationally, and those projects in tier 1 are secure. Those projects in tier 2 are a bit more competitive. The better we score as a continuum in our application, the more of our projects in tier 2 will be funded. So the sorts of things you will see is it'll be a list of projects. We'll show you what the rank order is, who the agency is, the name of the project, the target population, the geographic area. So is it in the balance of county in the city of Seattle, a regional project? How the project scored on the various elements that we looked at, what kind of project it is, how much its renewal award would be, and then we have a running total over here to the side. So you will see a mix of populations, etc. And then you will see our scores here. Generally, they are going kind of down in order, but there are missing numbers because we had to make some decisions about what was going to go into tier 2. So this was a project that was scored 55. It came between these two projects, but we put it into the tier 2. It might be because we started at the bottom. The first project at the bottom was the only project for domestic violence victims outside the city of Seattle. We determined that was something we wanted to keep and needed to keep in tier 1. We had several other youth projects that were staying in. And so this was one that we identified to put in tier 2. Again, it is the first one in tier 2. We have never lost any of our projects in tier 2, but we have to acknowledge this is a little bit more competitive. We made a decision to move that project down here. Then you will see there are other transitional or rapidly housing projects in the order here. We would have made sure that all of these met the HUD scoring elements, so we would not put anything in tier 2 that we didn't think HUD would fund. And then we have things in certain dollar amount order. And there's an algorithm that we've worked out that shows if a project costs a little bit more, then it will score a little bit lower. And so we will tell you why we put this $66,000 project, why is that the lowest rank? One of the factors we may consider is this is a project that might have other resources available to it, or there are various reasons that things fall in the order that they do. And we would provide you with an explanation on each of those points. And we will also have bonus opportunities, perhaps this year. You see a lot of question marks. Most years, there's a permanent supportive housing bonus. And generally projects have been identified for that permanent supportive housing project. We only use these dollars for operating and services, never for capital. If you use them for capital, they don't renew, and we want them to renew so we can keep getting the money year after year. So these are often some of the later dollars put into a project, often targeting chronically homeless people. And so they've often been, historically been identified through other funding, competitive funding processes, with these being the last dollars in. So we would propose a project here. We actually had some projects that didn't get funded last time we submitted that are likely to show up in this. There may be a domestic violence bonus. There may be a youth bonus. We just don't know. You as the advisory body would, of course, be part of advising on whether we would want to apply for those dollars or not. Generally, we want to apply for every dollar we can. but decisions need to be made there. So what we will be coming to is a list like this with things represented in tiers, our rationale, and looking for your endorsement, questions, and ultimately approval for submitting this hearing. And when you're going to see this, we wish we could tell you. As soon as we see the NOFA, we will let you know and get into your calendar. I think that's what we wanted to present today.
Thank you. I don't know if there are other hands that popped up immediately, but if not, I do have one question. Do we have the last competitive application somewhere available to look at?
Posted on the All Home website. I don't know if it's been transferred yet, but I know it is still available. And so we can send you the link to that, and you will see the full application, which includes our description of what our continuum of care is doing, what our various committees are, all of that, and then all the individual project applications. So we will definitely send you that link.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi. Thank you so much. To Kate and Eileen, thank you so much for your presentation. I remember your names from many years ago at R.J. Mitchell and other places. But I did put a question in the chat. I was questioning around the racial disparity and equity as a consideration in terms of the HUD consideration for projects. I wanted to know, are there strategies to support and welcome projects that are led by Black, Brown, and Indigenous executive directors? I don't know that they exist actually, but I'm just wondering if there are some sort of incentives or support and welcome for those projects and other organizational leaders. And is there a way to incentivize the points internally in King County to promote racial equity and justice? I always get concerned about the competition and the nature of competition, though I understand the perspective you're bringing it from, but in some ways it seems antithetical to have that as a consideration, the racial disparity and equity piece, but then you have the tiers in consideration. And I know that often that the dollars may end up going to the people who have the time, the effort, the team, all of that to actually do the process of applying that is often so difficult for smaller projects with organizational leaders who are doing everything, direct service as well as leading. And so I just wanted to ask questions about that, but it's in the chat as well for the benefit of us all. And I also wanted to ask, is there an awareness of racial makeup, like of the ones who have probably been in tier 1 for many years? Do we have an awareness of if there's a mostly white or probably maybe even all dominant culture executive leadership team when most of the people who are served are Black, Brown, and Indigenous? And is there a way for us to have some internal safeguards and considerations so that there may be equity even in that piece? And I'm also including board leadership, because often you're looking for people on the board who have access to Bezos and others, rather than looking for a broad scope of people who have actually lived experiencing homelessness and other things. So I know it's a lot, but I will appreciate whatever you can take on.
Sure. One of the things I can speak to, and I think some of the things you're mentioning, Kelly, and as this and the other processes are moving under the auspices of KCRHA and looking at doing RFP processes, I think these are the things you're mentioning are really important. What Eileen and I manage at this point is for the renewal projects that are sort of already in the mix. That's what this process has been thus far. We do try to look at equity, and each year we feel like we get a little better at it, and yet we know we're nowhere near getting there. And so we do have, part of the score, and one of the questions, how the programs look at their outcomes and look at them by race and see if they're seeing something different and seeing how they're actually working with folks once they are in their programs. We would like to look also at who they're accepting into programs, but that data hasn't been available to us thus far, so we haven't been able to look at that as a factor. And I think some of the agency things that you're speaking of, I know when both the city and county do sort of new, fresh RFPs as opposed to this renewal process, those sort of agency elements are definitely part of what we look at. But for this, it's sort of the more how the people who are in the program have been served. So I think some of what you're talking about as KCRHA looks to how you may want to improve this process going forward, those will be some important elements.
Thank you.
Really helpful feedback. And I think that part of the goal of the authority is to really revise the way that we're doing, requests for proposals and asking for folks to participate in public funding, and also then providing that support and making sure that folks have the ability. We took a lot of time in LA to tear apart our RFP process so that it was more accessible for small organizations that, like you said, it's one person doing all of it. You can't write a whole technical submission and a whole program submission at the same time. So we pulled those apart, and just looking at the process and making sure that it is making as much public funding as possible available to small organizations that haven't done business publicly before. So that's definitely, a responsibility set that we have, and we'll definitely want to work with the committee on that.
Absolutely. And just as a follow-up, we have the lived data, right? So we can look at a lot of the organizations that will continue to be tier 1 because of the numbers that go through and the way that we look for outcomes. They will continue to appear successful and effective. And I'm not saying that they're not, I'm saying, but they will appear effective and successful because of the things that we're asking for. But we also have the data of what we know. And that is largely executive leadership in organizations is dominant culture, largely white. And so if we can just know that and not assume that the status quo is something that we can live into, because this organization, as we are created now, is supposed to be impacting in those kinds of way. Advisory, that's how I'm taking on my work, to sort of open the things and to open the places where we're not necessarily considering equity work, because we can get it in terms of who we're serving, but that's because we're a racist society. That's because we're homophobic and all the other oppressive ways. So we can do the equity pieces in terms of who we're serving, but I mean the executive leadership, some of the things won't be hit until we are able to break open that and have true equity to be seen at the top and as well as at the bottom, if we are truly to be a continuum of care. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
And yay, Aradell Mitchell. And I remember Lavita Scott so fondly.
That's right. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Why, thank you. Up next is hopefully a update and some discussion around the regional and sub-regional planning processes that seem to be going on with folks we may or may not know. So.
Hi, everyone. So happy to be joining you today. My name is Alexis Mercedes Rink. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the sub-regional planning manager. And I have a little presentation for us today.
There she is.
Hello. Wonderful. So, sub-regional planning. So as your sub-regional planning manager, I am leading ongoing equitable engagement in each of the sub-regions, really to have a robust understanding of just the diversity across King County, understanding that each sub-region is unique in terms of its demographics, its needs, its assets, its infrastructure, its transportation. And so the philosophy behind this kind of work is really being able to have a robust understanding of that and creating tailored plans as we move forward as an agency. So what are kind of the fundamental pieces of sub-regional planning? So there are 6 key components to think about with regards to how we're doing sub-regional planning work and what you can expect from sub-regional plans. The first of which is being able to provide a full landscape of all of our services available to folks experiencing homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness. I mean that in a catalog sense, but also in a mapping sense. Where are things? The second piece is around money. Where are dollars coming from and where are they going to? The third piece is around actual lived experiences of folks as they're interacting with our homelessness response systems in each subregion. So centering that lived experience and working collaboratively with the Lived Experience Coalition to develop how we're going to go about garnering this information. But really wanting to understand things like, what does it mean to get a referral and then get to that referral, especially depending on which subregion you're in. The fourth piece is really going to be informed by what we find in parts 1, 2, and 3. And that's what are our gaps and needs in each subregion? Are there certain services areas that we're missing and so on? The fifth piece is around what we're going to do about it. So understanding that there are so many different actors that play a role in addressing the crisis. So what are things the Homelessness Authority can do, we as the RHA? How can jurisdictions support the work? What is the role of business and philanthropy? And so on. And the last piece is around timelines. So each of these will be fleshed out tremendously so. And all analysis and framing of this is going to be done explicitly with a racial equity lens in partnership with our Chief Impact Officer. And we are working collaboratively with a lot of our providers, again, our Lived Experience Coalition to build this out. So in terms of engagement to date, we have made contact with 118 different organizations, including nonprofits, providers, cities, 34 cities, and over 180 with over 180 people total. I've met individually with over 100 folks representing 60 different organizations. And just to give you a flavor of some of these organizations by subregion, here's just a little bit about South King County, for example. So organizations and providers such as Vision House and the Multi-Service Center, or community-based organizations such as like Para los Niños, Mother Africa. Then we have some of our youth services like Kent Youth and Family Services. It goes on. And I also listed some of the sub-regional collaboration meetings that I've been attending and engaging. This morning, I was actually at the South King County Forum on Homelessness, which is largely a providers group, talking through and getting feedback on a little bit about how we can regard and talk about ways to kind of section out South King County. I'll get into that in a bit. But we had about a 30-minute conversation, feedback session, question session, and really just learning from the folks who were at that table about the dynamics in the service landscape in South King County. And so going into North King County, attending groups such as the North Urban Human Services Alliance, the North King County Coalition on Homelessness. Those are the 2 main bodies in North King County that meet to talk about things related to homelessness. I have engaged with the city staff in all of the different North King County cities, as well as we've made contact with all of the provider agencies in North King County as well. And East King County. East King County, we have a ton of organizations as well, just to draw on a few, the Sophia Way, Hope Link, Contained Housing, Congregations for the Homeless, Youth East Side Services, and also attending groups such as the East Side Human Services Forum. We're actually presenting in September. Attending also EHAC, or East Side Homelessness Advisory Committee, and meeting biweekly with East Side city staff, whom we've heard from community. The city staff working in human services in the East Side cities are really well connected and have a good relationship, and they've been respectful in those relationships. So there's been a lot of good collaboration on the East Side as well. I also want to note that I've put forward an intentional effort to be engaging with organizations that are staffed by and supporting Black, Indigenous, and communities of color, even if they're not explicitly in a provider position, but wanting to make sure we're getting that perspective and engagement early on. To give you all a sense of timeline and when things are going to be coming out, we're intending to get a snapshot report completed in September. This will be a kind of at a glance of here's like what we've been able to collect in terms of information, and here's how we're building towards a draft plan, with the goal of having that draft plan done in early 2022 with a final subregional planning report in March 2022. So some of the reasons behind this timeline: robust and equitable engagement takes time. There are only so many hours in a day, it turns out. And also along those lines, I'm currently one person. But as you've probably heard, we are hiring for more positions, so I'll have additional capacity as well. We also have our local election cycle. As we know, primary day was yesterday, but we have a historic wave of city level retirements, meaning that for many cities, city councils are going to change dramatically in terms of dynamics. So want to be mindful of presenting draft plans to a council that isn't going to change in membership dramatically. And we're continuing to expand scope in response to additional subregions. I also want to pause for a second because I think I'm getting flashes that there's something in the chat, and I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. I can't see the chat. Sorry. Could somebody, I will wait until the end of my presentation. Maybe we can get to the questions in the chat. So we're continuing to also expand scope in response to really what we're hearing from our partners and stakeholders across the region. So this is how we are defining subregions right now. This slide has changed in the course of the couple of weeks. It's changed even in a couple of days as we continue to engage and learn about the service landscape. For examtal, there was originally no intention to create a Snoqualmie Valley plan. It was really with engagement with the Snoqualmie Valley Shelter Services, as well as folks with lived experience in Snoqualmie, that we learned that the Snoqualmie Valley is just so dramatically different from the rest of the East Side cities that a separate strategy is really necessary to address the needs of that community. And you'll see some of the jurisdictions, for example, Issaquah falls within the East King County and the Snoqualmie Valley Plan, and that is also in response to feedback, learning that Issaquah finds many of the folks that we had talked to in the city of Issaquah, from providers, from city staff, from folks with lived experience, said that there is absolutely no way that it falls into one camp or the other. It's not East Side or Snoqualmie Valley. There's so much intersection, especially considering how people are accessing services. A lot of folks in Issaquah will actually use the Snoqualmie Valley shelter. That's the closest shelter to them, but a lot of folks in the Snoqualmie Valley will access the different other types of social services in Issaquah, but there's deep connection to the rest of the East Side cities. So that's just to give you a flavor of what I kind of thought we're putting into as we make these classifications. It's always hard to draw lines and make these kinds of decisions, but trying to do so as informed by what the reality actually is. I'll point to another example. You'll see Skyway is included in South King County and the Seattle Metro Plan. I had the honor of attending the Skyway Leadership Town Hall meeting last Friday, where I openly posed the question and said, how do you all see yourselves? Are you in a South King County plan? Are you in the Seattle plan? Are you in both? Or are you in neither? And we had a really great conversation talking through some of the things. And right now it seems like we're either in the both or neither camp. And I'm going back to talk to that group soon to kind of have a further discussion about where they see it. But ultimately they had kind of proposed that there was interest around possibly creating an urban unincorporated King County distinction to account for the differences in Skyway and possibly Highline and White Center, for example. So looking into things like that in response to feedback. I'll end here and just say some things that you can expect from me, continuing to work on like data and review the different things that have been collected. We had consultants essentially create an asset catalog, which includes just information on funding that cities have put forward for services. And we're working together with the partners that put forward that information to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples and everything is kind of squared away on that piece. I am also sending out a regular email updates on sub-regional planning with all the folks that I've had the opportunity to engage with, just to keep them updated on what I'm up to. And also I use that as an opportunity to get feedback on the work that I'm doing. Pulling together information around key component 1 and 2. Also, as I mentioned earlier, working in collaboration with the Lived Experience Coalition to develop strategy for that key component number 3. Continuing to have ongoing conversations, and there's just a lot of opportunities to engage in this work as well. And as you know, we're hiring. So I will turn it back over to the chairs, and I want to thank you all for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have about this work.
Thanks, Alexis. Anyone have a question? Peter, can you see hands? If there are?
Seeing none, sir.
If not, I guess my questions will always be, it's a great update. It's great to see that it's working. It is slightly confusing from my end to hear that there's only one person working at it when we've heard others had been contracted to help form some of this work. So I guess I will start with who's all been involved in the process, when did it start, and how is the authority looking to move forward, you know? And what our role could be in advising what the sub-regional roles are, since of the 19 folks here, I don't think there's anyone that's not in one of those regions, you know, that has hands-on, lived-on experience in the work that they do. That's the sub. Okay.
To speak to the first question, just about how this work all got started. Before I came on board, Mark had brought on 2 consultants, Jason Johnson and Michelle Valdez, to do a sort of like early data pull from the cities, just to start getting information around where dollars were going. And they pulled together what they called an asset catalog. And that includes information on cities such as like Bellevue, Federal Way, Tukwila, all of them. It's 15 different cities, and they provided the information on who they were funding, who they were contracting with, how much. And so that provided an early look of the organizations that are being funded in the different subregions. We only received that catalog a couple weeks ago, I think now. I'm looking to Peter. Time is flying. But that was the initial work, and that was before I came on board. And they have concluded that project since, and I have received the catalog since then. So I'm trying to recall the other questions that you had, just about who's been involved in this process. I mean, I can happily talk through like how I've been approaching this.
No, you answered it very well. I guess my only question now was, where's the catalog? Who sees it? Who works with it? How is it being used to inform others?
Absolutely. So wanting to have, in talking with the human services planners that put forward that information, they were administered as sort of like ask, like, hey, provide your information on what you're funding. And that was kind of the broad ask. All that information apparently came in different forms. And then they took that information, synthesized it, and made a spreadsheet. I have a meeting with the human services planners to talk through and make sure that spreadsheet is accurate and telling an accurate picture, because they were concerned about that since they did not get to see the spreadsheet either. So wanting to talk through and make sure it's all cool beans. I haven't had the intention to send out the full spreadsheet widely. It was my idea that it would be then the baseline to then building out sub-regional plans. So a lot of the information in that spreadsheet, that catalog, will be a big part of sub-regional plans and what comes out in the final report. But I had not had an initial plan, at least to like post that on our website or anything like that. But I would look to Peter to talk through if this group would like to look at that.
All right, thank you.
So I think it was seen as draft until, you know, Alexis has had an opportunity to sort of field test it with, you know, with folks. So once it's finalized, it definitely showed that.
Thanks, Alexis.
Thank you all.
So for everyone here, Shanae and I both, as being chairs and trying to make sure that we're working in areas that folks want to take a little time at the end of each meeting to find out what it is the committee wants to at least have part of an agenda or give us a place to start. So we're really interested in hearing what folks have for us.
If I could take a second, and reflect on what I heard and captured as topics that folks wanted to brought forward. You mentioned wanting to agendize a discussion on the pit, which obviously, you know, like in Game of Thrones, the winter is coming. You know, the pit is coming. We gotta get there. And you know, I've heard a lot of different discussion on the ways it's been done. So I would really love to get your feedback. I heard a more extensive discussion about the interplay between the bodies. I think it was a little, you know, we tried to go through it in a little, like a high level, but I hear, you know, and one of the things I want to make sure is that you also see the membership of who's sitting on those boards so that, you know, everybody can see that.
Along with, Peter, real quick, along with where decision-making is made between the different committees and what work, in which work areas.
Okay.
So,
great.
Because everybody doesn't report to the same body anymore.
That's
It
right.
is multiple bodies, multiple groups making decisions as the authority. So understanding how those decisions are made will, I think, also help with folks understanding what we want to do.
There was, you know, I think it was Karen, I could be wrong, who indicated, you know, a question about how to, you know, kind of get to meaningful decision making. And I think that was, you know, it's in alignment with the question that you just raised, Marvin. And then there was also and I did not notate who said it, but was talking about the issues with regard to just having a broad impact. So those are the things that I flagged. And I also heard Kelly, you know, very clearly raise up the issue of, you know, how we do business and how we're identifying organizations to do business with. I want to bring that back because we you know, this is something that we're going to need to work with over time.
Is there any other topics, comments, or questions or concerns that others have that would like to be brought up into the agenda or want to be addressed?
So two things that Shanae and I broached, but we were hoping to share with everyone else, is the status of work emails for the committee and its ongoing work.
Absolutely.
And that the HUD portion of the authority's budget is only about 1/3 of the total dollars. So if we don't know what the budget is for other activities, how do we advise on whether, you know, on the use of authority dollars? So there is that understanding. Both were requests that we've already made, but I think we're in a better position to receive information as a group and for, you know, a better understanding of what it is that we will be learning about meaningful decision-making, work areas, and how we have a role in each of them.
Absolutely. So unfortunately, it is our time to end.
Thank you very much.
And we want to be on time for people and respect people's time. And so thank you so much for showing up and showing out. We appreciate your times and efforts and look forward to talking with you all in the future.
And if you have anything that you want to add to an agenda, please feel free to reach out. Yeah.
Thanks, folks.
Have a good day, y'all. Thank you.
Thank you.